seconds early, no harm done. So I'm Dave Ulmer. I'm chair of the Wake County Libertarian Party. Tonight's conversation, Zoom event, because we're not allowed to have our in-person events at the moment, is going to be about privatizing the ABC system and some of those reforms. And I'm sure we will also touch on a little bit how current regulations are making things particularly tough for the restaurant and bar industry. Our first speaker this evening is going to be Mr. John Trump. He is the managing editor of the Carolina Journal and also the author of Still and Barrel, Craft Spirits in the Old North State. So I think John and Adrian could have probably a much longer conversation, but we'll try to keep this to presentation length. And then we're trying to line up Michael Munger and Damian Horn to speak after that. I think as we get the speakers, we'll probably save most of the questions until the very end. But with that in mind, if you do have something that you feel is urgent that you must ask as we go, please use the raise hand feature built into the Zoom. If you have questions about that, the moderators are Amy Howard and Brad Hessel. We hope we don't have to mute anybody rudely, but again, please be courteous because this is unlike a normal in-person event. People can kind of get a little long-winded, including myself. And so with that in mind, I will mute myself and unmute Mr. John Trump. And sir, take it away.
Thanks. Here's the book. Shameless plug to get that out of the way. Yeah, and you know, you mentioned conviction, Adrian. A good friend of mine, Leanne Powell, who kind of started that, died last year suddenly, and it was a huge loss. But and she was basically the mastermind behind that operation, the whole whiskey prison idea. And yeah, she'll definitely be missed. And they're a stalwart among the North Carolina distillers, which there are many who are mostly making hand sanitizer now to try to stay afloat. When I started writing the book, I started visiting these distilleries, and it was a cool deal to begin with. Obviously, I started with like Topo and Esteban and moved on. But then naturally, you start getting into the regulations. And you start learning about, and I'm speaking to the choir very much here, I know, about North Carolina's arcane regulations. Well, you know, we're one of 17 control states, but we are the only state in the country that has a board system. So we have 170 separate boards, and you guys know this, dealing with, you know, counties or municipalities. Wake County has one board, Mecklenburg County has one board, Brunswick County, interestingly, has 9 boards because of the revenue from the beach. So, you know, how all this began, you know, Prohibition ended throughout the country or federally in 1933. North Carolina didn't end until 1938. And the only reason, well, a big reason that they let that happen here is the idea of local control, where they gave these municipalities, which started this board system, which goes back, heck, going on 90 years now, right? Kind of purview over spirits. So it's a control issue, and it's always been a control issue. And that's how it, you know, that's how it kind of began. So they say, you could have liquor in your municipality, you know, as long as you keep giving us money for it. And to make a long story short, that's why overturning these regulations are going to be so hard. Privatizing the system, which efforts have been made, but it's mostly been next to impossible because of that. Because of how do you replace the money? It always comes down to that. Now, you know, the Watts Act, the Ward Act, all that came through. A few years ago, McCrory signed out this. We didn't get our first distillery here until 2005, and that was Midnight Moon Piedmont Distilling, which really didn't distill. They just kind of bottled moonshine, but distilling wasn't allowed here till 1979. And the first one didn't come till 2005, and then they start propping up, and I believe there are close to probably 80 now from the Outer Banks, all the way through North Carolina. And there's some great stuff coming out. I mean, the rum, the whiskey, the vodka, everything we make everything except tequila, I think, because we don't obviously have agave plants. But a couple years ago, when before these distilleries had gone on, but there was no really way to go and taste and buy a bottle. So McCrory signed in 2000, I think it was 2015, October 2015, he signed a law where you can go in and buy one bottle per year per customer. And when I started writing the book, and this is how I was talking to Esteban, and he was like, yeah, they're passing this law, you could buy one bottle. And I laughed. And he's like, no, it's not funny. I mean, it's a big deal for us. Being able to sell one bottle and get our product out. But then, that was not enough. And it's certainly not enough. Because when you're dealing with the ABC stores, there's the federal regulatory issues and then the local regulatory issues. But if you want to sell a bottle, and you guys know, you got to go to every single board in the state. And there's 170 boards. Now, they've kind of conglomerated a little bit, and they've pursed it out, parsoned it out where, yeah, we'll sell to it. I mean, they've gotten together and figured it out, a lot of distillers. I know George Smith has Key City Spirits, which does a lot of this. But for the small guy trying to get started, that's what they had. They have to go to every single board to get it. Then you have to kind of beg to get in a liquor store, and then you have the shelf space issue, and so on and so forth. So it was last year, a couple years ago, 155 hit, which is, the media picked this up right away with the brunch bill. And reading through the bill, I was at Carolina Journal. It happened, it was funny because I wrote the book, then I got the job at Carolina Journal. It was a nice dovetail so I could cover this stuff, the craziness of it. And the media were talking about the brunch bill. Well, yeah, brunch at 10 a.m. is a great thing, but deep inside that bill was now distillers could sell 5 bottles instead of 1, and then open up for tastings and festivals and that type of stuff. So it was going on, and now it's gone on for last year with 291 with mixed drinks, unlimited sales. But the pandemic is kind of, and you guys like the restaurants, and I feel for you like crazy. And we at the John Locke Foundation, Carolina Journal are doing what we can. As far as the privatization issue, I mean, there are always in the General Assembly prohibitionists that no matter what you do, and Pat Hurley from Randolph County, no matter is one of them, and she's a wonderful, wonderful person, but she will not allow any type of alcohol to move, any kind of alcohol to move forward. Like, and last year, 971 was Chuck McGrady, who was Chuck McGrady and Rick Gunn in the Senate and House respectively, were big proponents of alcohol privatization, moving things forward with it. And Chuck actually put a bill forward that would privatize the system. And he got a hearing on it, which was a big deal. Now, it was basically a private licensure thing where you get rid of the ABC and you could license it out, and it would be like a lot of states and move into new territory where the free market would begin. Because as anybody knows, buying something in North Carolina isn't the most easy thing. I mean, even to get Buffalo Trace, it comes out maybe once or twice a year, and then everybody rushes to the ABC stores. Unless you know somebody, it's kind of like the old Soviet Union. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. But it did get a hearing, and there was a fiscal report out. According to it would remain static, about $384 million. Now, the ABC itself, the ABC Commission brings in $1 billion a year, and much of that is parsed out to the communities, municipalities with ABC boards. Now, if you don't have an ABC board, you lose out, which is the fight to get an ABC system in your county. And one of the bills last year was to eliminate that growth of the ABC boards. So that will help. There's 100, but there's still 170 boards. There was a move to consolidate the boards, which got shot down too. Also, as part of that bill, liquor would be taxed by the gallon as opposed to a percentage of the cost, which it is now. Excise tax 28 per gallon on a sale of spirituous liquor. Under current law, that excise tax is 30%. So it doesn't matter what type of liquor you're selling, you know, it's going to be 30% instead of what it is. So people are drinking cheaper alcohol is taxed less. Basically, what it comes down to. And like as I said, the distillery reform bill allows distilleries to nowadays can sell beer and wine with the proper permits, and let's see what else. Transportation permits. It's easier to transport it between places. Restricts the creation of new ABC boards. Because in the mixed drinks thing, and as you guys know, was huge. I have a friend, Scott Smith. Adrian, you might know him in the Outer Banks Distilling, where they're in Manio, so huge bus tours would come in, and people would come up to him and say, "Would you make me a mojito?" And he'd say, "Well, no, I can't. You know, I could give you the stuff to make it. You're gonna have to make it yourself." So the cocktail thing was huge, and unfortunately, you know, we're in a situation we're in that doesn't happen now. You know, a lot of the bigger distillers, I think, kind of the topos and maybe are doing okay now, but it's a struggle, and it's especially a struggle now where they can't make the product off of mixed drinks. And like I say, this has grown. Distilleries in North Carolina have grown exponentially despite all the red tape that's been thrown on them lately, and thrown on them and continues to throw on them. Now, as far as I know, there's been recently. I mean, the ABC has cut the audit. There was an audit last year, but on the ABC that they have 2 warehouses. That one mostly remains empty in Raleigh, and there was an audit about that they had lost millions of dollars. I think it's $11 million over 7 or 8 years. And just lately, there was an a program evaluation division report that came down on them, saying there's no consistency in regard to how they dole out penalties, and that's a major complaint. Where, you know, underage drinking, I think, makes up 34%, but then, you know, having a bad tag on a bottle it's just as much. So that's all part of it too. And the big we've said over and over, and I say in my writing as much as possible, that this is not necessarily about alcohol. It's not about alcohol at all. It's about tradition and innovation, and you know, having small business, being entrepreneurs, and allowing small businesses to succeed is what it is, and opening it up. And it's been such a huge population. I mean, huge way to bring in revenue. And you look at beer and wine. Well, beer, for example, until they popped the cap, so to speak, on allowing brewers to build, you know, brew at a higher ABV, did not that take off. And so it was the same thing with liquor. And I think that they were making steps, although, you know, the privatization thing and the ABC control thing. And here's my problem with it. I know an ABC store, which I'll keep secret for now, but where I can get, you know, stuff like I bought a bottle of Kentucky Owl, which you can't find. I paid way too much for it, and it's, you know, not really worth what I paid. But you can't get it anywhere else. You have to go yourself to Kentucky to find this type of stuff. I live in Cary, and there's an ABC store a mile up the street, and the shelves are basically bare. I mean, there's nothing new. And part of, like, I'm a big bourbon guy. Part of the fun is finding new bourbons, finding new releases, that type of deal, which is basically impossible in North Carolina, which is part of the system, part of the ABC control system. And it just leads. It's so open to corruption because you got 170 boards throughout the state controlling each individual fiefdom, and basically what it comes down to fiefdoms. And these guys trying to make it. I know Lassiter's distillery in Nightdale just recently closed, and there are other bigger ones who are saying, look, I can't do this anymore. There was a problem in Wake County for a while in regard to grudges. I know your family from there, and I'm not gonna allow any liquor. Now there are obviously things that we can push for and move toward. Unfortunately, too, as you guys know, the sealed container deal, which would greatly help restaurants during all of this, where you could go buy a mixed drink and have it to go. And they tried to throw the General Assembly tried to put that in the bill, the stimulus bill that they just passed I think it was last week or the week before. But Senator Berger, there was a House version, and then Childry of Wake County tried to put in a version in the Senate, and Senator Berger told him, we haven't talked about that. Let that one go. So, and as somebody said, the mixed drink, the profit margin on drinks for restaurants is huge, and that would have been a big way to help them out in this situation. There are other things they could do, like happy hours or online sales. Online sales is another thing where you can't sell online from distillery to somewhere else throughout the country or even in North Carolina. What happens is they'll contract out of state with an out of state in DC or South Carolina or whatever, and they'll get the excise tax. So we're missing out on an excise tax. And the idea is, and I think like Zeb Williams at Old Nick Distillery in Clemens says, or there's a Louisville, one or the other, says, we just want parity. We want to be on par with beer, and we want to be on par with wine. And I think it got to that point where, a few years ago or a couple of years, you would have to go in and do a tour, and then you get a tasting, and you'd have your liquor warm and straight until they opened up the alcohol thing, which was a huge deal. So yeah, that's all part of it. It's, like I say, it's going to be tough. I think, in North Carolina, we don't have bars. We have private clubs, and a provision to put private bars in our bars was kicked out too. The Christian Action League is heavy into the prohibition idea as well. And happy hour. There is no happy hour in North Carolina. You can sell something consistently, and again, I'm speaking to the choir, but you can sell something consistently at the same price throughout the day, although you can't have liquor at a certain couple hours at a certain price. It's got to be the same throughout the day, which is part of it. And both McGrady and Gunner are leaving the General Assembly. So as far as moving alcohol forward, there's got to be a will there. I'm not sure because and I hate to be a downer on this because people say, well, it's working fine. Why mess with it? But the ABC says, well, we made so much money. We made $1 million. We give you this money, but we're controlling it too, which, this is, stats show that, that's not necessarily the case, that we're not drinking any less than anybody else, or it just puts impediments in front of everybody to innovate and to make money and to be entrepreneurs and to live in a free market. So I'm open for questions. Basically I could talk like North Carolina distilleries, the moonshine, the vodka, who makes the best whiskey. Conviction's good. I would probably say, as far as bourbon goes, Conviction makes one of the best bourbons. And we make, my friends in Greensboro, the Normans make a vodka that you can still taste the vodka. You could take, not the vodka, but you could taste the grain. And, with vodka, when they distill 800 times, you don't get that. And they make world-class spirits in North Carolina. And once that whiskey starts to age and we give it some more time, some 8 or 10 years, because conviction, and has only been open just a few years, and bourbon, straight bourbon, is at least 2 years, and nobody sells it at 2 years anyways. It's at least 4 years or more out of the barrel. We could kill it, and we're one of the top states in the Southeast as far as beer goes. Wine has come a long way too, and there's really no reason we can't be one of the top states as far as liquor. If we would embrace it, if we could somehow get the General Assembly to embrace it. Now, say what you will about Cooper. I mean, everybody has their opinion, but he's been quick to sign all these bills, and I think he's business friendly in that, because you're getting it like Chopo gets their grain from Scotland Neck, and you get your distillery in Asheville, Troy and Sons had a local, which is in my book, has a local farmer who had an heirloom corn that they use. So it's all part of agriculture. The Department of Agriculture was heavy behind this too. Yet the regulatory hurdles you have to go through in this ABC boards, and it all comes down to, I mean, as simple as that. It'll come down to that money. It'll come down to the revenue. It'll come down to replacing that revenue, which is the hurdle you're going to have to. Chuck McGrady showed that, yes, we can make the money on excise taxes. We can make money on reduced over. You have all these buildings that are ABC stores or state-owned ABC stores that would go away. You get property taxes for it. There's ways to do it. We have to find a will and a means to. I mean, elections are a big part of it. Elections are a big part of it too. And some of the more rural legislators are a bit resistant to it. Chuck McGrady's not one of them, but that's the deal. And we followed it. I've followed it, just about every piece of alcohol legislation over the past 3 years. And I cringed. This was Representative Hurley too, when they were talking about crowlers, and she said that I was sitting next to Scott Maitland at Topo at the time, and she said, "Well, how will we sure they're sealed?" And it's a can. She's like, "Yeah, but it's a can. You can't open a can. I mean, it's until you open the can outside the restaurant." So there's just a lot of the prohibition era thinking going on in the legislature right now. Hope we can fix it. So thanks. Any questions would be great.
I don't see any yet, so I will start with a question. So what's probably achievable, if anything, in the near term, as far as moving in the direction of privatizing ABC, like the most likely or most probable? And you sort of touched on it. I mean, is this really true? I mean, we always talk about in North Carolina, the cliche article, the urban-rural divide. Is that really at play here as well?
In some places. I don't know. Well, there is that divide, obviously. There's a divide as far as the electorate goes, and there are divide like Wake County and Raleigh are going to be open more to something in Rockingham County, say, for instance, or opening things up in Rockingham County. Phil Berger, the Senate leader, they had a festival in his hometown in Eden for many years, which was the home to Miller Brewing. Miller had a huge plant there until just recently, and they would have a festival, but you couldn't drink beer at this festival, only in like this 8x8 space roped off. So, and the more religious segments of the population are going to be resistant to it. I mean, it's just the fact. It's just part of the culture. And some small towns throughout the state, you talk about Mount Pleasant and places like that are killing it with liquor, and but I'm talking to a group who knows what the deal is. A lot of people just don't realize what the state ABC is. They just don't understand how the state ABC operates. This is exactly how they figured, oh, they go to the ABC store and they buy liquor. There was a provision the last time for Sunday sales to be open on Sunday, and the arguments from the General Assembly, it was unbelievable. People staggering drunk to church, and they'll be out on the stoop of the church drinking beer, and it's like, sometimes you got to hold your breath and not say anything. But elections are going to have to change this, and there's got to be an argument, or somebody's got to find a way to convince lawmakers that this local revenue can be replaced somehow else, because that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to replacing that local revenue.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I saw Oktoberfest meeting without beer. Yeah, I know. We used to live in Rockingham County, and Joe, I forgot what his last name. He who did Midnight Moon, had a moonshine festival in Madison where his distillery was, where he produced the moonshine, better to say. He got such resistance. They were roped off. You could only go so far, and that could be a big draw to the town. It could be a big issue, but he got such resistance from it, and that continues on because people don't see the economic potential there. They see it's drinking and it's bad, and there's a divide. I talk about the rural-urban divide. Well, there's a divide between beer and wine and that line and liquor. Liquor's bad. Liquor's not beer and wine. It's just so much worse. And, a glass of beer, a glass of wine, a pint of beer, a glass of wine, and a shot of liquor is all the same. Same amount of alcohol. Yet they don't make that distinction as far as the ABC, which is why we have the ABC stores.
Understood. I think Stephen has a question for the group, or for you.
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you for the presentation. It's been very educational. Two questions that just my own ignorance. What is the excise tax rate for liquor and distilled spirits in North Carolina in comparison to other states in the Southeast, particularly those contiguous states with North Carolina? How does our state stack up with that rate? And regarding the manufacturing of distilled spirits and liquors, how many North Carolinians are on average employed in those industries? And is that manufacture broken out between urban and rural areas of North Carolina in rather even swaths, or is it more concentrated in one region of the state versus another?
That's a great question about the excise tax is pretty on par. I know at one time, like Washington State was 33%. Ours, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 12 or 15, just the excise tax. I may be wrong, but it's not, the excise tax is not way out of whack. Although it could be raised if, I know I'm talking to people who don't want to raise taxes, but it could be raised if you talk about replacing that revenue. So the excise tax, it's like more than half the bottle is taxes anyway when you're buying it. We talked about employment. It depends on where you are. As far as the distillery goes, I think the bigger ones, and I say bigger one, it's all on scale and it's all relative. You're talking maybe, like at that point where Lassiter's, it was just he basically and his wife were very small staff. I think Conviction may have 5 or 6 people. Distilleries, that's the employment issue isn't so huge. I mean, you have some salespeople too. That's not necessarily where the employment issue. I don't think anybody employs a ton of people. It's not like we go, if you've ever been to Jim Beam or Crown Royal, where it's a factory. I mean, it's a plant. It's like a steel mill. Not North Carolina, and you have maybe 8 or 10 people, I would think would be the max at any one place. So as far as employment goes, it wouldn't be necessarily the economic driver there, but I think it would be the tourism aspect of it. Tours and the cocktail bars, which is, and I know you mentioned Conviction, and Melissa and Lee had put a great effort forth, putting a cocktail bar in and doing that with their great products. And, COVID, for whatever reason, everything is shut down, has quashed that. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this out comes the other end. And I don't think, there's one producer here that wants to have the huge output, but most are craft producers. Most of these people are making it, grain to glass is basically the deal. Like at Manteo, I was talking, it was 4 guys who started it. It's basically 4 or 5 guys still that they come to work every day, and they do it out of a passion for what they do. And I don't think it's, and no distiller in North Carolina is going to get in and say, "Oh, I did this to make a lot of money." Well, that's not going to happen. Some maybe before all this happened were kind of finally making a profit a bit. But most are just doing it because it's a passion, and hopefully in the future they see something there that can spawn into beer or the brewery industry as it is. And I think that's the thing. The idea is even playing field, and maybe someday we could have spirits here like breweries are. Breweries, everything's before or after COVID, but before COVID, I didn't go to a brewery that wasn't busy, and there were a couple breweries that didn't make very good beer that were still busy. So I think that's what the stores want to get to that point.
Understood. Thank you. Amy Howard has a question, and then we'll go to Adrian and Travis. Amy, go ahead, please.
Hey, John, thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. My question is, what is the most common argument for the ABC system, and how do you counter it?
I think the biggest argument, it's not broken, why fix it? And people who want to keep the status quo talk about control. And one lawmaker said last year, it's alcohol beverage control. Well, we can't take the control out of it. And the argument for it, and this is it. It's that revenue they bring back to the municipalities. To go to educational programs or to go to cops. But the problem is, I think they go into a general fund someplace, then it goes to wherever. But like Wake County, if you look on the bag, sometimes they'll say, well, Clayton got this much money, and Garner got this much money, and Cary got this much money. That's the argument. You have your prohibitionists who say no matter, and your lobbyists like the Christian Action League who say alcohol's bad. It's the evil. It's the devil's whiskey. It's the devil's brew. And that argument will go on. But a lot of times I just hear if it's control is a big one. We don't want people stumbling around drunk. And if it's not broke, why fix it? Well, it's horribly broken. It's been broken for 80 years. Yet you can't see past the nose on your face to see, like, look at Kentucky. Kentucky had a ton of dry counties just a few years ago. And they got finally all these the Bourbon Trail, and then, it's bourbon capital of the world. Well, yeah, then they allowed distillers to sell mixed drinks. They allowed distillers to sell. There was a time where you couldn't buy Jim Beam at the Jim Beam distillery, and now you can. And it's this big kind of carnival for bourbon lovers. And they figured it out. And Louisville had just blown up because of it, Whiskey Row. And so it's there, as the potential is there, but you've got to embrace it. Kentucky embraced it. Virginia, here's another thing. Virginia's a control state too, one of 17 control states, but they're controlled centrally, where everything goes through one funnel. It's not 170 boards making 170 decisions on, say you're a bar somewhere, like, I don't know, in Murphy County, and you want to serve a particular whiskey, say you want to serve Conviction or make a cocktail Conviction, you have to convince that ABC board to get Conviction, because you can only buy it from the ABC store. So if you're a restaurant, you say, well, will you please stock conviction so I can make a cocktail there? It's you just can't go like conviction can't go say, oh, I'm going to put you in a restaurant. It's got to be through the ABC system. So everything's got to go through the ABC system. And, there's the warehouses in Raleigh. So no matter where you are, it goes to Raleigh. You ship it to Raleigh from Wilkesboro to Raleigh, and then Raleigh back out to Wilkesboro. It's just think about how ridiculous it is. But yeah,
All right.
if you read my columns, I mean, you could, I think, through the line, see me shaking my head and rolling my eyes, but it's crazy.
All right, Adrian, I'm trying to unmute you, and
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, I want to be able to make a statement because myself, I love to take the tours. I love to get the opportunity to go. I visited Conviction myself. Someone was bringing up a point that they were talking about employment. To give you an idea on one of the things that they do out there is that when it's time for bottling, they actually bring volunteers in to actually be the ones to do the bottling. So it's a major process that they do have to do, but they don't keep employees on file for that. They actually bring in volunteers, which I have actually offered my services for that. I've yet to get the opportunity to be able to do that myself, but that's how a lot of these folks have to do that.
Exactly.
It's a wonderful community process to be able to do that. And I'm certainly standing in faith that there's going to be a lot more of these distilleries that are going to get this opportunity to be able to go out and create these wonderful spirits and be able to connect and bond with their community the same way that Conviction has. One other thing that I wanted to, before I get to my question, one of the things that I want to make mention is I do understand your position, what you're talking about with Christians who have issues with alcohol. Ties directly to the Southern Baptists who actually believe that Jesus made grape juice. But yes.
Please do ask a question.
But, that is a major thing to have to get a hurdle over, and please understand that as a born-again, spirit-filled Christian, this is something that I am addressing churches about as well. My question to you actually deals with the individual distilleries, and I want to know if you believe that there is an impact that you have seen from for the lack of better terms, a pay-to-play type scenario to where you have folks that are running these boards to where they're basically saying, okay, if you want us to feature this stuff, you're going to need to do this for us. Also, for the lack of better terms, quid pro quo.
Right.
Please, what do you know about that?
I don't. I know a lot of the big guys, as they say, the Beams, the Royals, the Bacardis, the conglomerates. That's certainly the case. They'll come in with, and there are, I've heard stories of a couple people in North Carolina who have basically done the same thing. You see the big displays of liquor stores, you see a motorcycle sitting there. Where's that motorcycle go when they're done with it? And this is North Carolina distillery. They'll call it marketing, but this is the problem you have when you have 170 boards. I mean, with no oversight whatsoever, mind you. I mean, I think the ABC, the General Assembly, as part of the last bill, put in rules where they have to be more transparent and file reports every year. But it's just hard. How do you keep track of 170 boards and what they're doing, the whole pay for play thing? Now, naturally, Crown Royal and people like that, yeah, they have the money and they're going to do it. It's like, for example, if you're fighting for space on a shelf and you walk into a liquor store behind Jack Daniels or Brown Foreman, and you're a little distiller in where at Belmont, and you're like, oh, have my liquor. It's like, well, what are you going to do for me? It just I'm not saying there's corruption, there's been cases, but it breeds it. it naturally breeds it when you have 170 boards. And that's like, why are there 9 boards in Brunswick County? Because people go there in the summertime for the beaches. You know, Charlotte has a board. You know, Ocean Isle has a board. Calabash has a board, because they all want that money. They all want that extra revenue during the summertime because people are down there buying liquor. So yeah, it's not necessarily I'm saying there's corruption, but the system is a breeding ground for it. You know.
Okay. Well, thank you. And before I get to Travis, I will just point out from one of the bar owners I know here. A person does a tour of Scotland, finds a something that he might want to sell at his bar. Finally gets the ABC board to stock it, and then a larger business, like, let's say, some of the ones that are large, like Angus Barn in Wake County, have a lot more pull, and might see a rare bottle of a Scotch and pull that away from a smaller bar that is more boutique, or a kind of a specialty bar, as you kind of, it happens, unfortunately.
I have a friend who's a general manager at a store, and she ordered a special, it was a barrel pick. They went to Kentucky, they picked a barrel and bottled it, especially for this club, because that's, what they do. And it went to Raleigh and it disappeared. She's like, well, where's my case? Well, we don't know. We lost them. It's like,
It happens. Travis, I'm trying to unmute you so you can ask your question. I'm trying. There we go.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, John, for coming and speaking to us. My question is, from what I understand, some of these distilleries are not allowed to even sample, or their sample sizes have to be a certain really tiny cup. And they're not allowed to even sell their shots or their bottles at their distillery after the tours are done and whatnot. But from what I understand, wasn't there a recent law change where now they are allowed to sample or sell?
Yeah. They're allowed to sell now their product, which they weren't before. So you could buy a cocktail, you could buy a shot, which just prior to last year, that wasn't the case. You would go on a tour and you could get, it was 1.5 ounces total. So you can get 1.5 ounces of warm moonshine or whatever it may, gin or whatever it may be. And how many people, I don't know, maybe I'm off base here, but how many people drink straight gin? I don't know. So that's what you had, but that's all you could do. Unlike breweries, you just didn't have the chance to, sell their product or show it off, like the Navy Strength gin at Conviction. I mean, nobody's going to drink that straight. Somebody might, but most people are going to want a cocktail, whatever. But this is just recently. This is just last year. I mean, this just happened, and it's monumental, and it's monumental for them.
Yeah, it helps them make revenue as well. After their tours, they can sell their products.
Yeah, right.
Beautiful thing.
And two, it was limited to 5 bottles per year per person. It was 1 bottle per year per person, then 5 bottles per year per person. Now it's an unlimited thing. So if you're having a wedding or something, you can go and buy a bunch of rum or whatever it may be. And it was like the ABC too with the lotteries, where they get this, these spirits. Well, I'm struggling for the word, but hard to find stuff. The Buffalo Trace or the H. Taylor or whatever it may be. And last year, Wake County got, I don't know if you guys remember, a load of it. And they had a lottery in Wendell at noon on a Friday. So if you wanted any of this stuff, you had to go to Wendell on a Friday at noon and put your name on a little piece of paper, and they put it in the wheel. And that's how they distributed this hard to find liquor, which they didn't even tell you what it was. So if you want a bottle of Pappy or something, if you want a bottle of Buffalo Trace, good luck.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Well, thank you for your question, Travis. Thank you, John. So a little bit of unfortunate news. Damien, I've been updated that Blue is back out, and apparently with a couple muscle relaxers in him. Won't be speaking to the group this evening. I'm going to try to work him in later in the year at another event. However, we were lucky enough to have Amanda from Goat Bar on the call. So I thought I would give her, we were kind of chatting at the beginning before we began our presentation, but I'd like to give Amanda the chance to talk a little about challenges she sees with the ABC system, and then also the challenges we're seeing given the current situation. Amanda, please.
Thanks. I think, Wake County is known to be a really difficult county, and I think it's filled with a lot of old school, I don't want to accuse them of corruption, but I'm going to say the word corruption. And they're constantly changing the way they do things. Like earlier was mentioned, last year they did the lottery for all the rare bourbons, and you had to go there in person. When you walked in the door, they gave you a ticket. Your ticket, you held on one half of it, the other half was put into a thing, and they drew them right there in front of you. This year they did an online lottery, and what was available was constantly changing. And I know our bar, there was a separate one for bars, and when it came to us, we were told that there was a bottle we had been trying to get that was available but wasn't on the list. So everything is not it's not forthcoming, it's not forthfront, it's everything is being manipulated. And I think one of the biggest issues with the bars and the restaurants is the same ABC that we buy our alcohol from are also the same people that police us. ABC comes in and checks your permits. They check all the stamps on your bottles. So everybody's afraid to rattle the system. Everybody's afraid to speak up. They get away with giving terrible, terrible customer service. And you can't do anything about it, because if you don't want your name being heard across the ABC, Wake ABC, because everybody's afraid of retaliation. They're just going to come and check every week, come and check your bottles, and just be a pain in the butt for you. It's really disheartening. It's not a well-run system. They don't care if you want something. It's just not customer service oriented. And I feel like from my standpoint, I have to please my customers, and that they could care less about their customer. And there's no choice. We have nowhere else to go. So we kind of just eat it, and we can't speak up about it. And we do the best that we can.
So I'll ask a question, and I'm not going to be encouraged with the answer, I'm sure. But when you say you can't speak up, just for the sake of humor, because I know some other people have been challenged with the process, could you talk about the process where if you do have a complaint or a concern, how that flows through the ABC system? If you have a concern with your local board?
Typically, you take it to your local board. Here, it's, Wake ABC, which happens to be also in the building right next to where the warehouse is that you pick it up. And they're also the people that do the special orders. They're also the people that are connected with the ABC people that come out and do all your monitoring. And, like for us, we're a private club. So they come in and they check our files. They come in and check our stamps. And the more you rattle the system, the more you see them into your bar.
Well, to me, that sort of sounds like bullying, like they're bullying people.
100%. I mean, they have us, we have nowhere else to go. We have no other choice, and they can treat us horribly, and we have to sit back and take it. And when we complain, everybody's in fear of retaliation. And if you ask a lot of the bar owners and the restaurant owners, there's lots and lots of chatter between them, but everybody's afraid to come forward and speak up, because they don't want their name going across somebody's desk. because that triggers, you as a target.
Now, how would we bring this up in campaigns, like for just this coming elections? Like, what is a good way to approach this bullying that's happening in the ABC offices?
I don't know. I mean, the people in Wake ABC is run by a handful of people. It's like 4 or 5 main people that run that are not on the ABC board, but run Wake ABC. And then you've got, the Wake ABC that comes, and there's a team of people that come and, police you. We don't know a way around it, but it's the silliest. It's like an oxymoron. The same people who sell you the alcohol police you for the alcohol. And there's nowhere to go to complain, to make suggestions. I mean, my husband and I went last year and met with the head of Wake ABC for about 3 hours. Their system, which they have switched like 4 times in the past 3 years, and then they ended up going back to an old system, had not been updated in over 3 years. The general manager had never even been on the system. We had to show him how to get on the system, how to do this, how cumbersome it was. And he said, oh my gosh, I never realized all this. We need to make this a priority. Well, here it is, years later, and nothing's been done. For the first year, we'd follow up with him, once a month, once every other month. Hey, has there been any progress? And, always something more important. And that's just the way it is. It's a very cumbersome system to manipulate through.
Thank you. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you. I'll mention kind of to Travis's point, look, there's positive ways to sell this. John Trump talked about, tourism as an aspect with small brewers. You will get some pushback in rural areas, but nobody likes corruption. Even people who are, good, honest, what have you, people don't like hearing about government corruption. So that is, and there are stories, every bar owner can tell you stories similar to this. I'll have you know, if you purchase something from ABC, like a barrel or what have you, and it turns out to be incorrect, once you accept delivery, you can't return it. So sometimes owners end up with products delivered, paid for, that they didn't really want because ABC is not accountable, as has been pointed out, to anyone. And I think as you highlight those issues, Travis, those are something we should continue to educate people on. This is what we do. We educate people about the failure of government, and this is just a wonderful example. So does anyone else have a question? Would you like to raise your hand or wave at me or? Okay, well, that's fantastic. Well, Amanda, I greatly appreciate you pitch hitting as a speaker for us here. John, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I'll say one more thing about the website, the ABC website. If you're looking for a particular anything, you've got to scroll through this big price list on the ABC website. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, you got to scroll through a big price list on the ABC website, but you don't know which store of 430 stores in North Carolina it is. In Virginia, you could go to, your local store and find out what's there. So, that's another thing. You can't go to like if I want to, instead of driving up the road to the store, I type in to see if they have it. Well, you can't do that. There's a price list for every store in North Carolina. And if you want a bottle of the latest Lagavulin release, you've got to drive through, call 432 stores to find it. So it's not customer service whatsoever. It's pitiful.
Okay. So we have our next question will be from Dee. Let me go ahead and unmute Dee if I can. Come on, work with me. Dee, maybe unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi.
Go ahead, Dee.
Thanks.
I'm trying to figure out how to sell this to voters who maybe aren't so anti-regulation. And I was wondering if you compare it to the beer analogy. I haven't had a Budweiser or a Coors since I moved to North Carolina because we have so many fantastic craft beers here.
Good.
And I feel like we are losing revenue in employees because if we're not making our craft stuff, we're buying stuff from other places and shipping it in. Why do we need Kentucky whiskey if we can make it right here? And does that kind of thinking have any traction with people?
You would think in a perfect world it would. I don't drink mass-produced beer either. I mean, we're in the early stages of distilling in North Carolina. And the problem is the state has not gotten behind it like it's gotten behind beer and wine. It just has not. And that's the unfortunate problem with it because it has this problem with liquor. You know, we make some world-class, I mean, I won't say we make world-class bourbon quite yet, but we make world-class vodka. You know, and I'll tell everybody this too. If you're going to buy a vodka or a gin or a clear spirit, buy North Carolina. Don't buy any of the other crap because it's purely the best white liquor you can get. I mean, it's going to catch up because aging takes a while, and we're just not there yet. And people are trying to do it quickly, and sometimes it just doesn't turn out so great.
Sorry, can
as far as white
just
liquor,
ask?
go ahead.
But I mean, I was in the Outer Banks and I went to the Alligator River thing in North Carolina, which is like a state park. And there was a whole thing there about moonshine and how the North Carolina moonshine was supposed to be like the best in the country. And it's a clear spirit. And it was supposed to be fantastic. And it's all gone. So I don't understand how the state can simultaneously have a display about that. I mean, why wouldn't we have the best? Just like we have the best beer. Like, why wouldn't we have the best moonshine?
Well, we do. And I mean, you know, it's like the Calls and Jeremy and Broad Slab and George Smith at Copper Barrel. They make great moonshine. They do. We do, and I just I know if people just aren't aware of it. But there's no advertising system.
Alcohol is
advertising.
Is very brand driven, and so it's so hard for these small distilleries to get their names out. I mean, we have a whole section in our bar of just North Carolina liquors, and unless we specifically, every time somebody comes up and says, "Hey, would you like to try this rum instead of this rum?" It's just there's these big brands have spent so much money on brand recognition that these little brands, I mean, half of them they have one sales rep for the entire state. It's just so hard for them to compete. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, you've got these big brands that just not only spend the money on name recognition, but come in and, you know, just drop off boxes of cups and napkins and t-shirts and, you know, all this crazy swag so that their name is constantly all over the bar. And for the little guy to do that, to even print 200 t-shirts is a huge investment for them. And it's just, they're up against, you know, it's little business taking big business head on. And it's going to be a big uphill battle for them to get the name recognition out there. And that's why some of the ones that have done better have been places in the Outer Banks who get a good tourist season and who take a lot of pride in their product being made right there and put it on their menu as a specialty drink, and everybody drinks it and gets to see it. And then, you know, every time they come back to the beach in North Carolina, they buy a whole bunch of bottles to bring home with them.
Yeah, there's some wonderful marketers among the North Carolina distillers, but these big distillers, and I know from experience, they are printing money. And
so we'll loop back. Stephen had a question, and then we'll come back to Amanda. If you could unmute yourself, Stephen.
Thank you. So it seems the system that we have currently is bereft of oversight and accountability. any of the laws or bill proposals in the legislature that you know of, do they address this issue? Are there reforms in the works to address these conflicts of interest between selling and enforcement, to provide some mechanism for accountability or an oversight for the boards, or have those things simply not been addressed by the General Assembly?
I mean, there's a bill now to get consistency in the penalties, and to cases are dismissed are brought up and become more transparent. The ALE issue is right. It's the same people policing, and the moves been made. Chuck McGrady is the person who has tried this to separate it and keep the ALE, but just have them enforcement. You want to keep an enforcement arm, keep the enforcement arm, but because as it stands now, North Carolina does everything but make the liquor. You know, it sells it, it warehouses it, it prices it, it does everything else except for make it. You know, and Chuck McGrady tried. The bill came up. It came up for a hearing. Whether it's still there, whether it goes anywhere else is, you know.
Yeah. And corrupt government usually doesn't reform itself. Amanda, you still have your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's actually two. The ALE is run by the state, but each county also has people that come in and police you, and that's where it gets confusing. Because I think all the bars and restaurants would be open to having the state come in and police us, but it's when you have the county people in addition to the state people, and that's where the conflict comes in. You're buying from the county and they're policing you.
Yeah, because the ABC boards hire their own agents too, where they can. So, yeah, there's layer upon layer.
Brutal. Okay, we're at about the hour mark here. I'll take another question or two if somebody has them. Otherwise, I would like to wrap up and offer Amanda and John both a closing moment or minute here, or a key takeaway or what have you, and then we'll start the evening.
Oh, okay.
John,
yeah,
you go first, please.
I just keep reading Carolina Journal. We keep following this, and I'll keep pushing. Alcohol sales are up huge during the pandemic, or they were in the beginning. They're hurting a little bit because they can't sell to bars. So, you know, but people are still buying it. It's still an essential business, and do what we can to turn things around and actually promote business people instead of controlling them. But thanks. I appreciate this.
Thank you for joining us. Normally, if we're in person, we pay for your meal, we give you a pint glass, and we have some other nice stuff for you. So I will have to find a way to make that up to you.
But the Steelers logo works. I like that.
Okay. All right. Amanda?
I have a quick question. Is there anybody lobbying, like from maybe the North Carolina Restaurant Association, that lobbies for privatization?
Oh, sure. We lobby for it. John Locke Foundation lobbies for it. Then the Restaurant and Lodging Association lobbies for it. Yeah. There are powerful lobbies for it. There are also powerful. The ABC is a huge lobby in itself, though.
Who is there was a woman with the Restaurant Association. She was tied in with Craft Freedom and the brunch bill.
Yeah, Lynn.
What was her name again?
Lynn Minges. Yeah.
Okay, so I got like 4 people gave me the name at once. Maybe we'll try again. John?
Lynn Minges, Minges.
Perfect. I remember that name. Amanda, anything else you wanted to share with the group?
No, I think, I know firsthand that North Carolina ABC are hitting record sales during this pandemic, while all of us restaurants and bars are sitting on our inventory. I had called the North Carolina ABC and asked permission. I told them we're in jeopardy of going out of business. We have zero cash flow. We have no food to sell. We're a private club. We're heavily monitored. We, you know, have to go through all kinds of classes. Can we sell our bottles of liquor? And they put that off onto the counties, and that's when the counties said, well, you have 10 days and we'll take back 15 bottles a day that were purchased from January to now, and we'll do it for 10 days. And we won't refund you your $3.75 tax stamp on a fifth or your $8.75 tax stamp on a half gallon. So all these bars and restaurants are just sitting on this inventory, and it's a really scary place to be.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Like I said, there are restaurants and bars that are starting to go under, and these are the true mom and pop type places, and that's across Raleigh and Wake County. So very unfortunate situation. It's really unfortunate too, because a lot of places have outdoor seating or could adapt and have outdoor seating, which sort of mitigates some of the concerns around people being in a crowded bar. You know, it wouldn't be too much effort to put some picnic tables out and some other tables and simply, you know, serve at the door, so to speak. There's ways to adjust, but the powers that be seem unwilling to even let people have the opportunity to offer consumers a safer choice or drinking environment. So I do appreciate you speaking. It's unfortunate we're at this point. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the meeting. I thank everyone attending. And again, this is an important issue we should be talking about once this finally wraps up and we can get out there and make it a little easier to be in front of voters. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.